Salutations. This is another episode
Bienvenue.
of Cookie Pocket. This podcast is about film. And today we are discussing the Hollywood gem Casablanca from 1942, directed by Michael Curtis and starring, of course, Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman. This story centers around Rick Blaine and the owner of Rick's Café Américain in Casablanca in northern Africa. And Casablanca is a sort of purgatory for people that are trying to escape the perils of World War II. And Rick runs into an old flame over the course of the events of this film. And Rick is very individual, but also maybe not, and sees a higher calling at different junctions of his life. And this is very much a romantic film. And I would recommend it to, I think literally anyone should see this at least once. But we'll talk about that in more detail. I'd love to hear your general thoughts and ratings out of 5.
Zach, go. Ruin your life.
So I will just jump in here. I gave this film a 4 out of 5. That's not to say that I don't think it's a great film. For me, a 4 out of 5 is a great film. But like I said in my review, I do think that this is produced in a way that's very typical of the time that it was made. Hays Code era films do have a very typical kind of way that they're shot and edited. It's the typical way of covering a scene with your wide, your medium, and your close-ups. And it's perfectly adequate, and this movie does a lot of interesting stuff with it. But there are places where I feel you could inject a lot more visual interest that mean that's kind of a drawback for me. That being said, this movie is incredibly well cast. I particularly love all the side characters that aren't kind of our two main leads in the film, including Claude Rains. Claude Rains might be my favorite part of this film. And I think that snappy, witty, kind of hard-scrabble dialogue, typical of... This movie isn't really a noir, but it does have very noir-esque dialogue, particularly from Rick. And I think that really helps to keep the film moving and helps to distinguish it from being just kind of another romantic drama, which were kind of a dime a dozen in this era.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a great film, but I also think it was a very great film, Zach.
Okay.
And particularly because the number of things that are nuanced in this is, like, mind-blowing to me. How much nuance they could fit into a film of this era. Even though I realized it's just World War II propaganda to invade North Africa, which I didn't even realize until later. But besides that, I mean, it's just a lot of the themes that countries had. A lot of themes that the movie has are also aspects of countries at the time, and I definitely feel like Humphrey Bogart represents the U.S. Very obviously as a person. And I think that is already interesting. How like he's trying to be, I'm non-political, leave me out of it, like how FDR was up to that point. And I just just like those nuanced things about global politics and stuff are actually way more universally applicable than one would think. And especially because when you look at like the fact that Christian had said Casablanca is kind of like a place for refugees that want to go to the U.S. and things like that. That's an ongoing thing today. Like that's a very obvious post 9/11 thing that has been going on for a while. And those those relevant geopolitical things are really funny to me. But otherwise, I mean, the romance is not. It's not necessarily that standard. I don't feel like the characters are trying to achieve like an archetype or anything like that, to me at least. I feel like they're really trying to achieve something for themselves, and their paths of pursuit kind of like, come together at certain points, and they're all very, very consistent. And I feel like a lot of romantic films at that time are not nearly as consistent with personality traits as much. They're more concerned with like the framing of the romance has to be a very consistent way. And I guess this film kind of has that to an extent. But it has, the typical, like you had mentioned, Zach, very typical. I mean, the one obvious thing to me is the framing for females is completely different. You have the soft focus and the bright lights and things like that. I think Bogart, there's like one scene with him at the end, but otherwise, very, very obvious difference, close-up shots, things like that. Mm-hmm. But I love those things, and it sets it right in the period, instantly that it's in the 40s, and I think that's wonderful. I think that the fact that you can tell that the themes are universal, but you can really tell that this is a very much a period piece in a lot of ways. And I think that's so hard to achieve. I mean, there's so many different trappings that this film could easily, completely avoided right from the get-go for me. And I just feel like the fleshing out the characters so much and just having that dialogue, like you'd mentioned, Zach, is just so engaging and dynamic, and it's really, really fun to watch. And the side characters also, like even the side characters don't have to be important at all, but all of them are fun to listen to and watch and interact and things like that. And it's just like that the entire time. And there's so easy, like you could just, cut and paste so many different things, and they decided not to for this. And it really comes across to me. So there's very little, if anything, I would ever change about this. And I hold it in a high regard as it deserves, as like a very Hollywood, peak of Hollywood film for me.
Yes. 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 Okay. I gave this a 5 out of 5. I adore this movie. It's something that I think a while ago, I had always understood Casablanca had this perception, especially in our country, that it was like the greatest film of all time, or one of the greatest films of all time. And I don't think I ever understood from a genre perspective what it was. When I was younger, I certainly didn't think of it as a romance, and neither did I think of it as a war movie or an action. So it was kind of in this gray area of my mind where I just knew it as an old movie that people older than me really revered. But I'm kind of glad that I never visited this until it was either this year or maybe the end of last year. And this is an immensely powerful work of art, I think. You guys touched on how the side characters are really vibrant and interesting. Not even necessarily the supporting characters, but people that fill in the setting, like the pickpocket in Rick's bar, and the one of the waiters in his bar, and the woman that Rick has some argument with towards the beginning, and everyone feels really fleshed out and real, despite it being, to me, and Mitchell, you said this too, despite it really having the stamp of being like a Hollywood production. That's totally clear, and it's totally packaged in that aesthetic, but I've never seen that as a negative. And indeed, I think it deserves a ton of credit for it was made in 1942. Like, they did not know how the war was going to end at all.
Yeah,
when
they were telling us how the war was gonna end at the end. It's like, man, you're really shoving it in our face there, man. The Allies are going in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty daunting thing if you think about it that way. And I'm glad you mentioned the film noir touches, Zach, because just a year before this, Humphrey Bogart starred in The Maltese Falcon, widely regarded as one of the best of those of all time. And he certainly has this. I don't think there's any word better than iconic. There's nobody like this man, and he's just such a. The second he's on screen, you're just like, oh my gosh, and I don't think there's any other actor that does that for me like he does. I think of, we talk about people having the charisma gene, like a Harrison Ford type maybe, but it's just like, even him, there's just no one quite like Humphrey Bogart for me. And I cannot wait to watch more of his films. They're certainly on the watch list. I wanted to ask you guys.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
I was just going to say, I think one of the places that the film makes great use of that kind of typical Hollywood framing of close-ups, wides, and mediums is in Rick's introduction, where they know kind of that we've got Humphrey Bogart on our poster. There's going to be some draw here, so we got to make him wait for it. So when you're first introduced to him, you got this close-up of just his hand signing a check, and then you see him like pick up a cigarette or a cigar, and then we follow it from those close-ups up to a mid-shot of him, and then we get a wider shot of him in space. It's all very tactical, very specifically planned to introduce this character in this specifically Hollywood-framed way, but it's definitely tactical nonetheless.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and they do make you wait. I think it's maybe slightly over or just under 20 minutes before he's on screen.
Yeah.
Like, there really is quite a bit before he shows up. I wanted to ask you guys about the music in this film. There's, of course, a super iconic song, As Time Goes By, sung by Dooley Wilson, who plays Sam. And there's a couple other ditties, and then there's a really powerful moment revolving around 2 national anthems. And I wanted to ask you guys about that music, like the diegetic stuff, and what little score there is to offer. What did the music do for you? How much does it contribute to the success of the film?
The score of the film, I think, is, you kind of pointed out as what little score there is. It is kind of limited, classic Hollywood style score, the sort of orchestral thing you would hear in another film. But there are points in the score where they kind of incorporate some motifs that kind of come back later in the film, and I did really appreciate those. There are moments where As Time Goes By is incorporated into the score, and I think those are really effective. And there's also moments where the French national anthem is incorporated into the score as kind of a bit of subtle foreshadowing of the later dueling national anthem scene, which I really enjoyed. In terms of the actual songs themselves, As Time Goes By, it's a fantastic song. The scene with it is great. I also really like Bob Dylan's cover, just a plug there for Bob, of As Time Goes By, which was off the album Triplicate. It's a great version. But I will say, the scene with the dueling national anthems, I think, is a very good scene. But in hindsight, when you look at it from the context of involvement in the war, I do think it's one of the most obvious semi-propaganda scenes in the film. And when I say that, I don't mean it to be a negative or a pejorative in any way. But it is very obvious the theme they're pushing there. And as somebody who is not necessarily much of a patriot myself, that scene does come across, I think, as a little bit schmaltzy or a little bit corny in a way that the rest of the movie doesn't quite. It's an effective scene. It's a very, very effective piece of propaganda, and I understand that's the kind of thing the world needed in, the 1940s when this film came out. But for me, doesn't quite work. There's one shot, I think, that tips it over the edge for me, and that's when the woman who Rick broke up with her previously in the film, is crying and says, "Vive la France." That's the one shot for me that takes it a bit over the edge into schmaltz territory, rather than this is a really powerful scene. But I'm obviously addressing this from a very different perspective. I was not in the middle of a world war at the time, so I can't necessarily speak to the power of that moment that somebody in the 1940s would have seen in it.
So your favorite song was Die Wacht am Rhein, Zach?
Yeah, goodness.
Und-
What's
No.
the alternative in this situation?
Get your politics out of my podcast, Zach. I don't want politics here. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I'm just kidding, Zach. I'm just kidding. Okay?
I'm gonna have to cut in here.
I love that scene, okay?
Okay.
I love that scene.
Yes.
And Die Wacht am Rhein is not the national anthem of Nazi Germany. Just want everyone to know that.
Okay. All right.
And I think
Thank you, Mitchell.
that I'm gonna pull some English teacher asking me what I saw in the scene kind of stuff right now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say that the Germans are heavily into themselves and heavily romanticized to the point where everything they do is to reach an ideal, right? And there's a severe rejection of idealism, I would say, in pursuit of representing the fraternité, égalité, the liberté from the French by playing their national anthem. And I agree. Obviously, it's a pretty blatant message to yay democracy and authoritarian bad, obvious representation. I also feel like that's kind of representative of the entire time. I mean, basically everybody was a patriot by the time the war started, which you acknowledge, Zach.
Yes.
But I feel like that kind of overrides any criticism of patriotism, and I don't feel like it nears propaganda necessarily. I think it's I don't know. I think there's, based on every other aspect of the film, I feel like it was kind of just a short pulses of that, and kind of slight indications that, oh, America is not that isolationist, and oh yeah, France isn't all just sympathetic to the Nazis and stuff. And then at the end, they obviously, that is one of the main plot points with what's his name, the chief of police, Captain Renault. So.
Captain Renault, yeah. Louis?
Yeah.
Louis Renault?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It sounds good.
But yeah, I think the scene is really effective, and I love that music competition there. I do like Sam, our boy on the piano, you know, with the musical interludes. I feel like it gives perfect breathing room to contemplate what's going on, and to remember the names they've said 20 million times, so you can remember everybody. And I think, and by the way, I think that those formal introductions and things like that are representative of the time, and also aid the viewer in being able to keep track of everybody. So I really like the music. I think it fits the atmosphere pretty perfectly. The parlor definitely feels like a three-dimensional playing field in terms of dialogue and, you know, placement of people and what everybody else is doing. All, you know, just the whole aesthetic, you know, something that Netflix could never replicate. So I heavily enjoyed the music, and I think it fits perfectly. It didn't like stick out or anything necessarily, but I think it was great.
Yes, I agree. I have to. I'm working on being more diplomatic with Zach in my life and in this podcast, but I'm going to have to very, very forcefully disagree with him. Disagree with you, Zach, on everything you had to say about the national anthem scene. I'm sure your expectation might be that my favorite parts are the Rick and Ilsa stuff and the romantic finale and
well, yes, but actually no.
Yes, and I mean I think those are perfect moments. But my favorite scene in this film is La Marseillaise. There's nothing.
Yeah.
It just makes so much sense to me, and I see it. I have to agree with Mitchell, and I don't see it as a propaganda thing or even like a pro-French thing. Really, I think when they're singing that anthem, it's as much of a anti-authoritarian thing as it is an ideal. Like, you know, I think democracy is. Oh boy, I don't want to get too.
It was okay. The war part of the war was the fighting of ideals. I'm just saying that
exactly.
I feel like a part of the film's charm is that it's fighting romanticism while at the same time showing that many people can be sympathetic to it, and kind of be, you know, subservient to their own ideals over a country's ideals. And eventually it determines that the country's ideals are more important. But because of the romance intertwined in there, I think it makes it a very unique film in that way. But go ahead, Christian.
Right. Yeah, no, that's well said. And I think the idealism is like something these people need in this time. And I don't think the characters are as beholden to the idea, to these ideas about propaganda or like sovereignty or country. Like, it makes total sense to me for Victor Laszlo to walk over to that orchestra and tell them to play it, and for Rick to subtly but assuredly nod yes. Like, those are two important and logical character moments that really make the scene for me, because that's one of the first moments where you see maybe these two men aren't all that different. They just they may want the same things, and they're perhaps both virtuous, but they have different lives and different ways about going about that. So I love the scene. I think it's amazing. I think it's flawless. Okay.
I can see what you're saying, Zach. I understand. It's just you go ahead.
I often feel like I get lumped in as the villain of the podcast in these situations. So I just want to clarify here that I'm not arguing for it as a bad scene. I think the scene is strong and it certainly serves a purpose within the film. But I feel that the way the scene is delivered and directed and the way certain close-ups of characters are shown does make it a scene that feels kind of the only scene in the film, really, that feels kind of like it's turning to the audience going, "And what do you think, dear viewer?" And I think... Since I think that tone doesn't quite mesh with the rest of the film, and that kind of takes me out of it. It feels a little disjunctive. Now, I'm not saying cut that scene right out. You don't need that. I'm just saying that I think the delivery there feels like it is trying to make more of a statement, whereas the rest of the film is just trying to be itself. And things that you pick up from what it's trying to say, you can pick up, but it's not deliberately like leaning into the theater and pointing to you in your seat and going, "And how about you?"
This is like every game is political Last of Us 2 argument.
Yes. And I think in 1942 that finger point at the audience is justified and good, honestly. I'll just say it. I don't care.
Yes, sure. I'm just saying, with a film this old, you're going to get things that have dated, and I think some of the and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that is a scene that I think, because of the time that it was made, has intrinsically dated in some way.
Okay.
All right.
Agree to disagree.
Moving on, because
Zackaroony
I need to.
diddly-dee.
Okay.
I'm gonna pull a Die Hard on you guys.
Oh my goodness.
Is this a war movie?
Is it-
Uh-oh. Okay, that's in 1917, because I asked pretty much the exact same question.
Oh.
Yes, this
Okay.
is true. Sorry, Mitchell.
All right.
I stole it from you.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say yes, because I think there are 1940s films are pretty much like 90% war films. Okay, and even if it was set in during the war but didn't concern the war. But the problem is that every movie that's set in during the war is going to concern the war, because the war concerned everybody, basically. So pretty much, I don't see how this couldn't be a war film. I think that a lot of the themes that are present in the actual war itself are present here. And I also think that the war being one of the major, wrenches in the whole plans of everybody's lives is a pretty obvious factor. I mean, literally everybody is affected by the war in some way. And I think it's intrinsic to every single character in the film. So I think it's pretty hard not to say it's a war film, but obviously I think the romance is kind of the main focus, the main, delivery, the train, I guess the comedy is like the caboose. And I'm using train euphemism again. And then the cars with all the stuff in them, I don't know. The war is all the coal and the resources in the middle, and the train chugging along in the front is the romance. All right.
I wish our listeners could see Zach's face right now.
The middle? Do you know where coal is stored on a train?
I don't drive trains for a living, Zach. Okay. Maybe you have a better opinion than me. I don't know. Apparently, you drove tractors before, so.
Well, okay, but moving on. I would say I think I'd agree with Mitchell, outside of that confusing metaphor, that this is definitely a war film. Something like this came up on Twitter relatively recently. There was a thread that blew up on, like, is Alien really a horror movie? And I think the answer is yes, it's a horror movie and a sci-fi movie. Similarly, here, this is a romantic drama and a war film. Somebody might argue, well, the romantic drama takes up most of the movie, but it can be both. It takes place against the backdrop of the war and growing tensions in the United States and outside of Europe. And I think that having that backdrop, even though we never really see combat and tanks and armies, means that it is a war film to some degree. We recently, at Mitchell's recommendation, watched The Gathering Storm, which there's very little war in that either. But that's also a film that takes place against the backdrop of the war, despite mostly being kind of a political drama. So I would say that also is a war film. I don't have any difficulty calling this a war film at all.
Cool.
Nice.
You guys said that well, so I'm not going to really add to it. I pretty much agree. Dang it. I just thought of another question that I didn't write down, and then I immediately forgot it. Oh, okay. Yes, got it back. The ending is often widely regarded as the most iconic part of this movie. Several of the long list of quotable lines in this come in the last 5-10 minutes or so. What did we make of the ending? What did we think of Ilsa/Rick's choice? And also, listeners, if you haven't seen the movie yet, pause it and go watch it right now. But okay, what did you guys think of the ending?
Well, for one thing, I wanna go back to the dialogue, because I think a big part of that quotability obviously is the dialogue, but a big part, I think, of why the ending works is the dialogue as well, because we get that speech from Rick about, like, if you go with me, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually you will regret it. Which I think, in a way, that's kind of like, I think Rick, as a character, has sort of established the male fantasy of not, I'm going to get the girl, but I'm going to get the girl and then turn her down. Like, that's the thing that shows up in all kinds of media, and I think this might be one of the very first examples of it, which means that's hugely influential. And then also, Here's Looking at You, Kid, is one of like the first really big setup and payoff moments in filmic history, and it's incredibly effective because of the way it harkens back to the use of that phrase earlier in the film, and it really gets to you. I hadn't watched this film in several years, but I found my brittle heartstrings being tugged a little bit at the delivery of that line at the end of this film. So I do think at the end of this film wraps everything up really well. The actual resolution of the plot of Rick just shooting the general, that kind of feels a little bit like, all right, that wasn't really the point anyway, we're going to sweep that under the rug. It does feel a little like quick. I don't necessarily believe that Louis going like, somebody else did it, would necessarily solve that problem, but I think it works for what the film is trying to do. It resolves the important stuff, and it makes an effort at least. It makes a pass at going, and the rest is going to be fine. So yeah, I think it's a good ending.
I think it's a nice happily ever after ending. And I think I was hoping that Giga Chad Rick was going to be like, nope, go to America without me because I'm chilling at my parlor. And then she was like, and he was like, too bad. And that, it's so exciting. And I don't know. I mean, we've all seen, Zach has seen films where it's gone either way. And it's kind of like, but love is the most important thing. And then there's other films that are like, but the greater cause is the most important thing. And I feel like this is heavily aware of that and tries to dance around it as much as possible by having this not extremely intricate, but comparably intricate for the time dialogue that is heavily nuanced. And Humphrey Bogart does like a phenomenal job just being a stoic, like, I don't care, center griller the entire time. And he's just... just how consistent everyone is and how the entire film is based off of what you want to happen. It kind of just it pulls at you based on how you look at it, like what you want out of the film. It's not like it's not trying to meet expectations necessarily. It's or meet a certain set of expectations. It's trying to meet like every audience member's expectations in some way. And I think it does it beautifully. I mean, I can't like think of any other way really it could have ended. I think that little sideline thing is kind of an uncommon thing for films of that time, and I think it's a really cool like, oh, the authority is still just being the authority, dumb like he did, and somebody else did it, and then the authority's like okay, and then they run away. I think that's great symbolism there, and I wouldn't change it at all. And everybody just did a really good job. I don't know. I think Ilsa is wonderfully cast. I think she has tons of nuance to her facial expressions, and she's giving the exact performance that everyone would want from her. And I just think that and you can see every ounce of emotion in her face, like wanting to stay, and just everything falls together perfectly. There's really not a lot else to say. I think you really just have to see it and understand. You just have to understand, see it to believe it.
Totally. Completely agree. And I'm glad you brought up Ilsa. We would have been remiss to talk about Bogart this much and not touch on Bergman.
Yep.
She
Ingmar
really
Bergman.
is a vision. No, Ingrid Bergman, Zach. You take your European filmmakers and throw them in a bag and save them for later.
Not in my parlor.
Yes. No politics in my American cafe. No, but Ingrid Bergman is a vision, and Mitchell, you said it best. Her facial expressions are great, and I can't imagine anyone else matching up to Bogart the way she does, because it's just perfect. I struggle with talking about this movie because there are so many points in which I'm just like, it's perfect. I don't know how to say it because it's so good. But yeah, and I also wanted to about the ending. I think I agree. Maybe it's a little throw it all together when he shoots the guy, and then Captain Renault is just like, round up the usual suspects. But at the same time, it's an interesting sort of moral arrival point, because you're spending the whole movie trying to figure out how invested Rick is in the conflict and in helping people, or how he's figured himself morally amongst the warring sides. And I think it's interesting to suggest that grayness amongst the captain as well. But the biggest takeaway for me not just from this ending, but from the whole movie on my second watch, is the first time I was not rooting for Rick, quote, Giga Chad, to basically refuse Ilsa. I don't know if I knew it was going to happen, but I definitely didn't want it to happen. I was rooting for him to win, I guess. But this time, I was like, he's so right. Laszlo, she should go with Laszlo. It just made total sense to me. And you notice more on a second viewing that Laszlo is like this truly virtuous man who will love her and is important to like the goodness of the world that Rick would like to detach himself from, but he really can't because he does care despite everything he says.
Laszlo's more of an American ideal than Rick is.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Oh.
But I think that's definitely portrayed, but then at the same time, I think they really are fighting for the same thing in different ways. And
Yeah.
It's just I'm cracking up, man. It's just so good. Okay, oof.
Stop it.
Yeah, I just
We're
love
here to
this
do
movie.
business.
Okay, final thoughts, guys.
Highly recommend. I think everybody should see it, and it's a great romance, and it's got a lot of guy things in it. If you like the final countdown, you'll definitely like the 5 seconds of archival footage they use. And yeah, I think it's awesome. I mean, it's just it's very American. It's a very American film. And it's a period piece, but also, I think it's got a lot of aspects of it that are definitely replicated, and Indiana Jones, James Bond and stuff. But yeah, 5 out of 5, no problems with it at all. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I've given my overall thoughts on this throughout the episode, but I did want to mention I do really like that Usual Suspects line. It also makes me smile that line later gave the title to the film, The Usual Suspects. And
Wow.
I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Peter Lorre, who plays a relatively small part in this film. But I think he does wonderfully as, I can't remember his character's name, but he's the one who has the passes that he gives to Rick at the beginning and then is shortly after
he is great.
arrested. He's a great character actor. I know him from a lot of German films, but he went on to a illustrious career as a character actor in Hollywood. And he does really, really well in this and really establishes a presence in the film despite being in it for a pretty short period of time. So much so that I remembered him appearing in way more scenes than he actually does. So yeah, great actor, great film.
He is terrific. Another one in Maltese Falcon. He's amazing in the Maltese
Yeah.
Falcon too. Oh dear. 5 out of 5. This is I can't quite name my favorite film. Maybe it's this, maybe it's The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, but this will always be in the discussion. I just don't have the words for it. I think it's so immensely powerful, and when I think of what constitutes like a good work of art or a successful film, I think of this movie first. And it's this is so non-specific and emotional, but please just go watch it. Please, do yourself a favor. Ask your mom and dad to watch it with you. Make an event of it.
Nana. Definitely get Nana on this one.
Nana
Yes,
will
get
like
Nana
this
on
one.
All
this
the
one.
nanas, all the papas. We're getting them
Yes.
all in this time.
And
Just gets
shout
5
out to my
nanas out of 5.
grandparents.
Yeah.
Yeah, shout out to my grandfather for keying me into this, because it is truly a beautiful thing. And dear listener, silence your phone for like 2 hours and just throw this on the telly and try to make a connection with it. And I
Throw it
think
on the
you
telly.
won't be disappointed.
Hey, delete Instagram. Destroy your phone in the process. You may be a better person.
Do that
because of
too.
Oh boy.
All right, thanks guys. That was tremendous.
it. Magnificent.
Okay.
Are we doing the review of the weeks of the weeks?
Yeah,
Weeks
we're
review
doing-
We
weeks.
are.
Doing that.
Huzzah!
Well, I might be about to make Christian a little angry here, but I'm about to
Uh-oh.
talk about music.
Oh dear.
I just finished listening to the full discography of George Harrison, which means that I've now listened to the entire solo Beatles discography.
He beat me to it, guys. He really did.
Wow.
And I feel like I finished
Crazy.
reading like Lord of the Rings or something. Like it really does feel like I've been on a journey here. I'm gonna try and I think
An unexpected journey.
an unexpected journey. I think all four Beatles went on to have very different and very interesting solo careers. But to keep this quick, I recommend two sets of four for a bit of a taste of each of them, kind of the initial platter and then the comeback platter. So my initial four recommendation would be Ram for Paul, Plastic Ono Band for John, All Things Must Pass for George, and self-titled Ringo for Ringo. I think that gives you a good idea of where they all started at the beginning of their careers.
That's actually pretty
And
good.
then-
I'll second
And then
that.
the comeback platter, I'd recommend, I think Egypt Station for Paul. I'd recommend Double Fantasy for John. I'd recommend probably Cloud 9 for George, and then I'd recommend Time Takes Time for Ringo. Time Takes Time is like one of my favorite albums that any of them ever produced solo. I really love that album. So yeah, but anything by the Beatles, I do recommend checking it out. There's still some classical stuff by Paul that I have to check out, and maybe some live albums I'll listen to along the way. But I've heard a lot of stuff I want to buy and listen to again, and some albums, many of them by Ringo, that I probably can just kind of leave for a while. But yeah, it was quite a journey, and if you're into a couple months worth of Spotify listening, I'd recommend you go on it too.
Want a break from the ads?
Yes. Wait, Zach, you gave Ringo's Christmas album a 4 out of 5, right?
I did.
Just wanted that on record. In which he sings a cover of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and the last time he sings the phrase, he sings Ringo the Red-Nosed Reindeer because he can.
Oh no.
Okay. There's some killer.
I
marimba
actually
on
love that album. Yes, I
Oh,
totally
goodness.
agree. It is such a guilty pleasure. It's so fun.
My God. Maybe if I accidentally come across it one day.
I don't know what I was planning on talking about, but now I'm just going to talk about the Beatles because Zach opened the floodgate.
Oh God.
Sorry, Mitchell. I agree with. I wouldn't get too caught up in the whole like return. I actually like Egypt Station a lot, but for Paul, you should listen to Band on the Run if you're going to listen to any Wings stuff because that's like probably the best.
only
of
thing
it.
I know.
I'm guessing Zach would agree with me on that one.
I was aiming more for a before and after
Land
thing, but yeah.
of the Lost.
Sure.
Land
And-
of the Lost. Oh God.
Oh gosh, John Lennon. Listen to Imagine. Listen to Imagine. I found this new song.
Watch the
called
Olympics.
Imagine.
It's my little
Okay,
secret.
you know, I think that's enough of that. I just listen to the Beatles. I don't
I'm
go
about to
ahead,
talk
Mitchell.
about some really high art right now. So, okay. All right.
Do it.
Are you ready? Nutty
Proceed.
Professor? Huh?
Oh no.
Eddie Murphy? Huh?
Oh,
All right. Listen. So we've all talked about Paul Blart, right? What if Paul Blart was a professor at a university, and he happened to be Eddie Murphy, and he wanted to be thin, and he did it, and Jada Pinkett Smith is there, and she's great, and Dave Chappelle is there a lot,
because women
and
be shopping.
it's women be shopping. And it's a wonderful film. I mean, Eddie Murphy is hilarious, okay? Eddie Murphy is widely known to be hilarious and everything. And this is just, I feel like this is really representative of his ability to not only be like, split with, what's his name? What am I
James
thinking of?
McAvoy?
James McAvoy.
Oh, yeah.
Brain hurts. James McAvoy levels of representing different people in a family. Also, the effects, besides the exaggerated CGI that feels like Scooby-Doo half the time, besides that, I think that it's just awesome. Like, just seeing Eddie Murphy talk to himself with different character voices and things like that is just so funny to me. And I know, Zach, okay? It's not advanced. It's not big brain, okay? I understand. It's entirely preferential to Eddie Murphy's humor. A lot of the film is really built around that. And it's got some nice messages. You feel very sympathetic to the main character. Professor Clump is a very sad man, but he's extremely smart and has a lot of good qualities, okay, Zach?
Yeah.
So
I was just gonna say.
I'm just making fun of you. It's okay.
No, I
But
was gonna say.
anyway.
I feel like you were trying to diss me there, but I was just gonna say that the makeup in the film is really good, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it actually got nominated for an Academy Award for Best Makeup.
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
Wow.
And it should have got it.
It
should have
good
got it.
stuff. Yeah.
It's awesome. Okay.
Zach,
I highly
you know why
recommend it. It's. Well, I was gonna say. Okay, go ahead, Christian. Go.
No, I was just gonna ask Zach if he knew why they were named Blart and Clump, but
Oh God.
that's really not.
Anyway, my dad made a wonderful point. Hi, Dad. That they don't make family movies anymore. Okay, and this is
Yeah.
a family film, and this is
Well
funny
said.
to anybody. It's constant. It ramps up towards the end. There's actual every single bit has meaning, and it's not it's random, but it's not random to the point where you feel like you're lost or there's not wittiness to it. And Eddie Murphy's a wonderful actor. He's a wonderful comedian, and he's always deserved my praise, even in Madagascar. All right, like he's great. Okay,
He's in
and
Madagascar.
isn't he in Madagascar? I'm tired.
He's
Could be. I haven't
Mushu
watched
in
that film in a
Mulan.
while.
Mushu and Mulan.
You might be thinking
Yeah.
of Chris Rock.
Chris Rock is great
Oh, dear.
too. It's okay. Dave
Yeah.
Chappelle might be in Madagascar.
He
I
might
don't
be.
know. Madagascar is a great movie, but but yeah, I think he's great. So I gave it a 3 out of 5, but I think I recommend it. It's a family movie.
Yeah. Okay.
Excellent. Okay, and then it was time for the rundown.
Yeah.
Yay!
I jumped in the street and I'm ready to get run down.
Yes. Ba-dum-ba-ba-ba-bum. As time goes by. Okay. We're gonna propel Zach. Propel Zach. What does that mean? We're gonna. Okay. We have things from Casablanca. Zach's gonna give us a number. Okay. Mitchell, are you ready?
I got Donkey mixed up. I
What?
got Donkey and Shrek mixed up. Okay, I'm ready.
So wait, you thought Donkey
The reason,
was
okay,
Marty?
I'm gonna explain myself. The reason why is because Jada Pinkett Smith is in it, right? Jada Pinkett Smith is Will Smith's wife, right? Okay, or was?
Correct.
There is. I don't know. Not okay. Was.
knows?
And is. Okay. And Will Smith is in I Am Legend, right? And he impersonates Donkey in I Am Legend. So that's why I got it confused. All right. We can do a Casablanca rundown now.
That's
I
such
just
a
want to make that
roundabout
clear.
connection.
That's the reason.
Oh
I'm
my
telling you.
gosh.
That's the reason why, Zach. Please
Okay.
don't dig this hole for me.
Mine is not to reason
I'm ready.
why,
I'm ready,
mine is
Christian.
just
I'm
to
ready.
do
I'm
that.
ready. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
Exit Visa Pro Strats.
4 out of 5.
Viches everywhere.
3 out of 5.
Underestimating blundering Americans.
3 out of 5.
La Marseillaise.
4 out of 5.
Laszlo flexing all the time.
3 out of 5.
Dooley Wilson as Sam.
4 out of 5.
Isolationism not being a practical policy anymore.
3 out of 5.
Sticking your neck out for nobody being a wise foreign policy.
3 out of 5.
Hearing Kittle and understanding less.
3 out of 5.
Little.
Little, sorry, I mistyped that. Humphrey Bogart as Rick Blaine.
4 out of 5.
Waters in the desert.
3 out of 5.
As time goes by.
4 out of 5.
Tinny parlor pianos.
3 out of 5.
Ingrid Bergman as Ilsa Lund.
3 out of 5.
Not being the kind that tells.
3 out of 5.
Here's looking at you, kid.
4 out of 5.
Mitchell and Christian as Richard Blaine.
4 out of 5.
Either laying off politics or getting out.
3 out of 5.
Zach Garrigus as Captain Renault.
Oh, 4 out of 5.
The beginning of a beautiful friendship. Time.
4 out of 5. Oh.
Okay. I fully
There's
ran
some
over because
diddly
we've got
delay
some
there.
connection issues. I gave
Yes.
us like 5 or so extra seconds. I cheated a little because of that.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Yeah.
Don't tell him.
No, I mean, no, I. Who dares accuse the overlord of pocket of cookies? Anyway, this has been a terrific discussion. Even if Zach is wrong, I had fun. Thank you, guys. Okay, what's
Okay.
next?
Well, I guess the
Zach, you
wrong
can go
person
on.
will discuss what we're watching next time. Next time, the entirely unplanned and unintentional World War II trilogy comes to an end when we talk about Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator, which is known as a huge classic of satire and comedy and one of the greatest movies of the 1940s, if not all time. It's got a massive reputation. I actually hadn't seen this film until this episode, so I think we're all going into this pretty fresh. So yeah, if you're interested in hearing us talk about maybe one of the most well-known comedies of all time, please tune in next time for The Great Dictator.
Of all the episodes, of all the podcasts in all the world, you walked into this one. And for that, I am thankful, listener. This has been Cookie Pocket. This podcast is about film. And we'll see you next time.
Au revoir.